sometimes you just want to make a Timmy deck that goes smash. Like, really, really goes smash. Like, the only thing the deck can do is put a big green creature out that just blows somebody's life points out of the water. Well, that's kind of what we have going for us today with Kona Rescue Bestie. Now, Kona is a new commander and technically does not have a price point yet, so that's kind of why I do a lot of these early previews. Not only does it work well for the algorithm, but also it means that I can do a commander while they're technically priced at nothing. The price is made up, so it's under $1 as far as I'm concerned. It's ethereal. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about Kona Rescue Bestie and how this is gonna be one of the most fun commanders if you really like big green stompy nonsense. Kona Rescue Bestie is a beast survivor that costs 4 mana. It's got survival, and that ability says if it's your second main phase and it's on the board but tapped, you can put any permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. Now, it should be fairly obvious what we're going to be doing with a deck like this. We are going to be putting a bunch of big creatures onto the battlefield. So let's go ahead and talk about what we are going to be putting down. Now remember, we can put any permanent on the battlefield, so any of these are fair targets. Beginning with the Sylvok Battle Chair, a 6 mana for a 4 Mirrodin ability, which gives us a 2/2 creature with a 4/4 equipment attached to it with Trample. This is basically a Colossal Dreadmaw with that ability. And we also have the Colossal Dread Mask, which gives a creature 6/6 and trample. It's just a slightly better version of the Sylvok Battle Chair, which is, you know, just a more on-the-nose way of saying we've power-crept Colossal Dreadmaw. Then we have the Copperhost Crusher, a trample hexproof creature that's an 8/8. Walking Skyscraper has trample and ward if it's untapped. Eldrazi Devastator's an 8/9 with trample. Ulamog's Crusher's an 8/8 with Annihilator. Ancient Stone Idol's a 12/12 with trample. Rust Goliath is a 10/10 with reach and trample. Spawning Grounds makes a 5/5 green beast with trample every turn. Breaker of Creation has Annihilator 2, hexproof from every color, and also, when you cast this spell, you gain a life for every permanent you control that's colorless. Hierophant Biotitan's a 12/12 with trample. Cybership's an 8/8 that says when it deals combat damage to a player, put 2 cards from that player's library on the battlefield under our control as 2/2 Cybermen. Titanoth Rex is an 11/11 with trample. Lumbering Megasloth's an 8/8 with trample. Verdant Force is a 7/7 that makes 1/1 little dudes. Sandworm Convergence makes 5/5 dudes and stops flyers from hitting us. Breaker of Armies is a 10/8 that must be blocks, killing all kinds of creatures. Bane of Bala Ged attacks and makes the player that's defending exile 2 permanents. Caller of the Pack is an 8/6 with trample and myriad, so it spawns lots of them. And End-Raze Forerunners gives all of our board 2/2 and vigilance and trample when this touches the board. Holy shit, that is a lot to go off of. Basically, everything is some kind of giant vanilla stompy what to do, but we also have a lieutenant. Howpack Piper sits here and does the same thing that our commander does in the event that we are not able to get his effect online for whatever reason. Dawnglade Regent is doing similar. Dawnglade Regent is giving us access to the Monarch so we can draw cards, and also lets all of our permanents have hexproof so we don't get hit. And Sarah the Viper's Fang gives all of our creatures hexproof if they are untapped, and Death Touch if they are tapped. This will allow our creatures to swing in with Death Touch Trample, one of the best combinations of abilities you can ever have. Then we have the Moldgraph Monstrosity, which has trample, is an 8/8, and if it dies, it takes 2 creatures from our graveyard and puts them onto the battlefield at random. Mending of Dominaria also serves a pretty good purpose in this deck by milling 2 cards and letting us get a creature from our graveyard into our hand. It also allows us to get a bunch of lands from our graveyard onto the battlefield if we need, but that's not going to happen too terribly often. But you may be asking yourself now, how am I going to make sure that this commander is tapped all the time? Am I just going to attack our opponents with it? No, not really. Instead, we are going to make sure that our commander is tapped as often as possible. And we've got 8 cards that have only one job, and that is to keep our commander tapped and happy. Let's begin with the Funeral Longboat, a 2-mana vehicle that will crew using our commander. It will never attack. The only thing it's here for is to make sure our commander stays tapped and summoning creatures from our hand basically for free. Sky Skiff is doing the same, and Flywheel Racer is again doing the same. Then we have the Renegade Freighter, which has the ability to give a creature 1/1 and trample until end of turn if we have a big dude that doesn't yet have trample. Dodgy Jalopy has power equal to the greatest creature we have on the battlefield, so that's a thing that we're going to sometimes swing with. And then we have the Dermo Taxi, which has the ability to be a copy of any creature in any graveyard. This gives us access to graveyard removal, while also giving us access to potentially powerful cards from our opponent's graveyards as well, depending on what strategies they have. Imagine taking somebody's Archon of Cruelty with this, right? Then we have Pacification Array, which can tap an artifact or a creature, and Icy Manipulator, which can do the same, while also being able to tap a land. I could have chosen all vehicles for this deck, but I think having cards like Icy Manipulator in allows us to prevent people from using things like 3-Tree City or Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, and oftentimes that's a very powerful thing to have access to. There's plenty of lands you want to keep tapped down so that you don't lose, like, say, you know, that 3-Tree City that I mentioned that gives shit tons of mana. That all said, we do want to make sure our commander is tapped all the time so we can summon all the creatures he can from our hand. But we do need to make sure our hand is at least populated with some decent cards. So let's talk about how we're going to make that happen. Now for this section, I've got some cards that draw, and I've got cards that just yank creatures out of our deck. Let's begin with You Meet in a Tavern. We'll just look at the top 5 cards of our library and take any creatures from among them and put them into our hand. We can also use to give all our creatures 2/2 until end of turn, but that's probably never going to happen. Lead the Stampede does the same thing, and Nissa's Revelation lets us scry 5, then reveal the top card of our library. If it's a creature card, we draw cards equal to its power and gain life equal to its toughness. Yeah, with some of the creatures I named, that's kind of insane. We can draw 12 and gain 12 life with this. Garrick's Pack Leader and Garrick's Uprising both draw us a card every time a creature is played that is big enough, which is every creature we have. Return of the Wild Speaker draws cards equal to the greatest power of non-humans we have. Soul of the Harvest draws us a card every single time we play one of these giant monstrosities. Glorious Sunrise can draw us a card if we have a creature with power 3 or greater at the beginning of our combat. Harmonize lets us draw 3 cards instantaneously when we cast it. And finally, Vivian on the Hunt says that we can sacrifice a creature. Then we can search our library for any creature card with mana value 1 or 1 plus the creature's mana value and put it on the battlefield. But we can also +1 her to mill 5 cards and put any of the creature cards milled this way into our hand. Both of these can give us exactly what we need in any situation in terms of getting lots of advantage and lots of creatures. But we do need to make sure that we are doing more than just drawing cards. We do need to make sure that our opponents are being kept from winning the game outright. So let's talk about that. So the removal package of this deck is fairly deep. We've got 12 cards beginning with Cleanup Crew. This 6-mana creature says when it touches the battlefield, we can blow up an artifact or an enchantment or exile a card from a graveyard or gain 4 life. All very valid options. Then, of course, Meteor Golem gives us Omni Removal. Acidic Slime gives us Pseudo-Omni Removal by not being able to kill creatures, but being able to kill basically everything else. Return to Nature is a quick way to get rid of any artifact, enchantment, or a card in a graveyard. Reclamation Sage is a quick way to get rid of artifacts or enchantments. Terrasta Dawn gets rid of 3 non-creature permanents when it touches the board. Bridgeworks Battle is an MDFC that allows us to fight any card on the board very quickly to get rid of it with our giant creatures. Vivian Reed says we can blow up an artifact, enchantment, or a creature with flying, but it also allows us to look at the top 4 cards of our library and put any creature or land from among them into our hand, which is, you know, kind of perfect given the deck that we are playing. Colony Ambush is another fight spell that is attached to a land. I really want more of these in the game. Duplicant can come down and imprint any card, taking it away from our opponents by exiling it. And then, of course, he becomes that card's power and toughness, but he doesn't gain any of their abilities. Spine of Isha is just another way of saying Meteor Golem, but in a different love language. And then Hunter's Talent says when it enters, target creature we control deals damage equal to its power to another creature we do not control. Then, whenever we attack, target attacking creature gets 1/0 and trample until end of turn if we level it up, and if we level it up once more, at the beginning of our end step, if we have a creature with power 4 or greater, we will also be able to draw a card, supplementing all of our packages totally. Getting a little bit of lording of keywords, a little bit of draw, a little bit of fight, all those things and more Hunter's Talent can do, and it is fantastic at. But that's not everything. We also have to have a board wipe, and in mono green, we have a couple of options. I've chosen only one, though, and that is Nevin Rawl's Disc. While we could go for things like Ezreal's Predation and other cards, I've decided to keep it very simple and just drop the Disc in for a couple of reasons. One, in a pinch, we can just drop it on the board with our commander. Two, I think it's very fun to have a bunch of monstrosities on the board and say, hey, mutually assured destruction will happen whenever you decide you want to step out of line. I think that's entirely a fair way to play Nevin Rawl's Disc. That all said, let's go ahead and talk about affording some of the big cards in our deck, even in situations where we may not have to play them with our commander. Now, the ramp section of the deck is fairly robust, but it doesn't need to be as expansive as a big mana deck normally would be. Let's go ahead and begin with the Rainbow Rock that goes in every deck, letting us have access to graveyard removal and also ramp. Dawn Shredder, Elk, and Wayfarer's Bauble make their return like in most of my green decks, as these come down and get us the lands we want very easy. Heaped Harvest gives us access to land when it drops onto the board and also when we sacrifice it. Gilnerea, Caller of Wirewood gives us mana, and also if we spend that mana to cast any spell with converted cost 6 or greater, we get to draw a card, giving us more access to draw, while also being just a massive dude. Then we have Beanstalker Giant, letting us search our library for any basic land, and also gets to be a big creature in its own right. Farhaven Elf and Ramp Growth get basic lands out of the deck, and Arcane Signet and Ornithopter of Paradise manage to be basic mana rocks we have access to as well. So, with all that said, the only thing left is our lands, which are super simple this time around since we are a mono green deck. We have 27 basic lands and 5 lands that are serving different forms of utility. Myriad Landscape can ramp us, Blighted Woodland does the same, Mosswort Bridge gives us access to Impulse Draw, not really, it's more of a Impulse Omniscience effect. We hide away a card and then we get to cast it from the top. Scavenger Grounds lets us sack itself to exile all graveyards, and Bonder's Enclave gives us access to very easy draw because we always will have a creature with power 4 or greater on the board to gain access to the Bonder's Enclave ability. That all said, this deck is very simple and straightforward, but I do think it still deserves a gameplay section. So let's get into it. Let's go ahead and start with some gameplay, and let's talk about keepable hands. You want a hand that has a little bit of ramp to get the commander out and make sure that you've got some good castable cards. In this hand, we've got a Sandworm Convergence that can set us up for the entire game, as well as a fight spell to get rid of anything that's problematic, and we've got Vivian Reed, who can populate our hand with lots of cards. So let's go ahead and keep this hand, draw our card, play our forest, and tap it for the Wayfarer's Bauble. Our next turn comes up. We've drawn a Breaker of Armies. We don't really need it, so we're going to go ahead and play this forest, crack it, and we're going to get another forest out of our deck, getting our commander down a turn early. Now that we are on turn 3, the only real play is to play a forest, tap them out, and just get our commander on the board. We don't have a way to tap our commander outside of swinging yet, but that doesn't really hurt us. We have the Bridgework Battle in our hand, so during the next turn, we're going to use this to clear the path so our commander can go ahead and do some damage. We draw the Cleanup Crew, so now it really depends on what kind of a game we want to play. The Cleanup Crew will allow us to get rid of an artifact or enchantment if that is necessary. The Sandworm Convergence will be very good if we're fighting any deck with dragons or other flyers. The Breaker of Armies is really good if somebody happens to be playing a tokens deck that we need to stop, and Vivian on the Hunt is perfect if everybody is playing a very battle cruiser style game, since Vivian will give us access to lots of cards very, very quick. I'm going to go ahead and assume that our opponents have been playing fairly aggressive strategies, though. So we're going to pay 3 mana, get that Bridgeworks Battle out, giving our commander 2/2, fighting a thing, and then swinging at the opponent that it fought something off of. This means that we should have a fairly clear path, and with our commander tapped after attacking, we're going to get that Sandworm Convergence out, so that we can go ahead and get that 5/5 token and be in a very, very good position for following turns. Speaking of which, we're on turn 5, we get to play the forest, and we have 6 lands on the board. This means that not only will we be able to use our commander's ability, but we can also go ahead and get Vivien on the board by playing her like any other Magic card. Even though we typically don't want to be casting our cards, we do want access to some new stuff. Now, she does have the ability to sack a creature and search our library for a creature with mana value of 1, because it's a token, but we're not going to be doing that. We are instead going to be milling the top 5 cards of our deck and getting any creature milled this way into our hand. She's milled the top 5 of our deck, and an Ornithopter of Paradise and a Copperhost Crusher make it into our hand, with the other cards going to the graveyard. Losing this as Revelation does hurt a little bit, but I think I should implore everybody and let you know that when you are playing Magic the Gathering, milling is only psychic damage. It doesn't actually affect you in most games. We attack with our commander to the exact same person who previously took our commander damage, so that we make sure that that player is likely not going to have a board state to block us, as we don't have any of our easy ways to tap things out yet. Now, with what we have set up, let's go ahead and keep under that previous assumption that our other players are playing a lot of stuff that we need to get rid of. So as much as I'd like to drop down Copperhost, we're going to assume that somebody has a big board, and that's what we are avoiding with our Breaker of Armies. This will also solidify our commander's ability to swing in following turns. We spawn an extra worm token at the end of our turn. These will allow us to defend Vivien, and then the next turn comes up. On turn 6, we're going to go ahead and use Vivien's ability once more, milling 5 cards. We've milled an Eldrazi Devastator, a Duplicant, and a Verdant Force, which will all make their way into our hand. Playing a land for turn gives us 7 mana. So, as it stands right now, we can actually use a removal spell in Colony Ambush, or we can use Duplicant or Cleanup Crew to get rid of a problematic card. Once more, we're going to assume that our opponents have been playing plenty of cards we need to worry about, so Cleanup Crew is going to come onto the board and make sure that our opponents lose an artifact or enchantment that they would otherwise be using to harm us. Now we're going to swing our commander at the player that the Breaker of Armies and the 2 worm tokens are swinging at. The Breaker of Armies will make sure that our worms make it through, as well as our commander survives the fight, and our commander is now tapped for the next turn, meaning we will go ahead and get Verdant Force out. As much as I would like to get Copperhost Crusher out, I think that a good strategy right now is to accept that going wide is our current plan, because we want to keep our Vivien online, so making sure we've got plenty of tokens to defend her is probably paramount. Now that we're on turn 7, bear in mind that Verdant Force spawns a Saproling during each upkeep, meaning not only did we get a 3rd worm token at the end of our turn, we also got 4 Saprolings across everybody's turn. So that's 1 Saproling per turn. So our turn comes up, we can go ahead and play this forest, and let's go ahead and use Vivien's ability once more, as we've done a pretty good job at defending her with a lot of tokens. It looks like Vivien may have whiffed a little bit, but we do still get Moldgraf Monstrosity, which will give us more access to cards during later turns, and I'm okay with that. Milling these 4 cards doesn't hurt us as much as one might think. Also, since we've been able to play another land for turn, we actually have enough mana to flat out play our Eldrazi Devastator if we want. But once more, we are gonna go with the previous assumptions that our opponents have been playing very aggressively, and we need to get rid of their cards. So Duplicant is going to get rid of a problematic card, and we're gonna use our last bits of mana to play an Ornithopter of Paradise. We don't really have much of a reason to play it, but there's no reason to hold on to it in our hand, and it is a dork that can block a flyer if we lose Sandworm Convergence and we need to defend Vivien in other ways. Now, after everything swings, we're going to go ahead and make sure that this Verdant Force, Breaker of Armies, Cleanup Crew, all of the worm tokens, our commander, and the Saprolings that have the ability to attack are all aimed squarely at one person. once more, this means the Breaker of Armies is going to be able to absorb all of the blockers. So in terms of raw damage, we have 6, 9, plus 7, that's going to be 16 damage on top of 5, 21, 26, 31, and 35. Assuming this player has been hit at least once during the game already, or used a few fetches and shocklands, we've eliminated one player out of our commander game with our commander and all of our cards, and on turn 7, which is a reasonable time to do so. We've also made sure that we've removed not one, but multiple threats with our Breaker of Armies and our ETB effects. This should ideally put us in a position where our opponents don't have all the resources available, and we are keeping our resource that spawns us lots of cards into our hand online as long as possible. In our hand, we have a couple of easy-to-cast big threats in case we get board wiped, and we have a Colony Ambush, which we can use as a fight spell if things get hairy. So, on this, we end our turn spawning yet one more Worm token, and another Saproling token for every single upkeep that happens in between the turns. On turn 8, we just happen to draw one more big creature. We've already eliminated one player out of the game, and we can just use Vivian's effect for funsies now and see what we get. An Ancient Stone Idol is a nice hit, and it's the only hit off of it, but honestly, at this stage of the game, on turn 8, we've killed a player, and we have just a giant board state of stuff that is very hard to deal with, and our commander is going to be able to play more cards for free as the game goes on. Honestly, we're in a winning position. We don't need to push ourselves too much further. As long as you can establish a really powerful board state on turn 8, you're probably in a good spot. This is a good place to just end a game on, all things considered. Now, if you're deciding to upgrade this deck, which you should, I really think there's only one path you should go. And the first thing I've got to talk about is fleshing out the deck's draw package. An Elemental Bond, a Tribute to the World Tree, and a Rishkar's Expertise will go a long way in making sure that the deck's longevity isn't threatened by running out of speed. Now, I also think that an Archetype of Endurance will do a very good job in making sure that you do not lose access to your commander, and really any of the other big beasties on the board. But after you get those, this is the direction I would take the deck in. I would get every single Titan, every Eldrazi Titan, all of them. Now, here's why. Now, while most Eldrazi Titans do have a when you cast this spell ability that you do want to have access to, and you will be losing when playing this commander, I am a fan of fun, fair magic. Now, if I play an Ulamog on turn 3 for free that is indestructible and Annihilator 4, I feel like that's good enough. I feel like I don't need the when I cast this spell blow up a permanent. I feel like Ulamog being on the board is plenty. Or Ulamog the Defiler, who has Ward Sacrifice 2 permanents. He enters the battlefield with 1/1 counters for the number for the greatest mana of any card in exile, which people get things into exile all the time during this game. So he's probably going to do perfectly fine. Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, again, indestructible. I don't care that he has a when you cast this spell ability. We don't need to worry about that. Kozilek Butcher of Truth. It's Annihilator 4 on a 12/12. You don't need more than that. You don't need the when you cast the spell draw 4 cards. It's fine. It's a 12/12 with Annihilator 4. We are playing, and I should quote and remind you, for free. Emrakul World Anew, a 12/12 that has protection from permanents that have been put on the board this turn and spells that have been cast this turn. You can Kozilek the Great Distortion gives you access to counter spells in green. And, I mean, hell, Kozilek the Broken Reality gives all of our colorless creatures 3/2. If we're going to be going full ham into an Eldrazi deck, then it's perfectly fine for this guy to be out. It that Betrays and Pathrazer of Ulamog also don't have cast abilities that we care about, and they are still big Eldrazi. If you're gonna upgrade this deck, honestly, the best path forward is just Eldrazi. I've been seeing so many people do vehicles with this guy, and I think big noodly guys is a far better way to go. That said, All things considered, I do hope you enjoy this deck. I wish I could have made it Eldrazi in its first iteration, but I didn't have that kind of money available for this. This is a very budget deck. $8 of the budget is taken up by the commander, leaving $15 for the rest of the deck. It's a $23 deck as it stands. And, I mean, of course, when the commander comes out, I'm hoping he drops under $1 so this video doesn't age poorly, but realistically, I just think that getting a bunch of big guys out, it screams Eldrazi or dragons. And I've done a lot of dragon decks already, so this one's Eldrazi. If I do a full power Kona, it's gonna be an Eldrazi deck. And it's gonna cost way too much money, because Eldrazi's are stupid, and people have one brain cell when it comes to Eldrazi, and I will die on that hill. Anyways, that all said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like. Let me know in the comment section below what you would add to this deck. All things considered, I think this commander is going to drop down in price when it comes out. I hope so. I hope it doesn't go the Bristly Bill route, but we'll see. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already. And insert in the video tagline here.
Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravelern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Agamotto, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Curatorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.